Uh, Hazel Ramos was a graduate of our MA program around 2004, and I actually still remember the Blue Book comps exam that Hazel and other students would write for comprehensive exams. It was a timed session in the conference room, filling in a Blue Book. And shortly after Dr. Flager arrived, we got rid of that and had to move to a take-home comprehensive exam format, which I think is more humane and thoughtful. Hazel's a survivor of the battle days, so to speak. But Hazel herself has her AA degree from Glendale Community College, and is then got an undergraduate degree from Cal Poly Pomona, and then came to Cal State LA for her master's degree. Since then, she has become an instructor of history and is currently, and has been for a while now, the chair of the history department at Glendale Community College. So Hazel Ramos is involved not just in teaching classes, but also in kind of building a department, building a program, recruiting, retaining faculty. So I think it's a great way to start our session tonight by welcoming Hazel Ramos. So we're really excited to have you back in our department, even if it's just on Zoom. So thank you, Hazel.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. Beth, sorry, I'm confusing you with our other Professor Flager at GCC, and her name is Beth. Birdie, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. And thank you for all of you for being here on a Tuesday evening to hear us talk about our experiences as community college professors. So, gosh, 17 years ago, when I left Cal State LA, I had a really amazing experience. I went into the program, the MA program at Cal State LA, knowing fully that I wanted to teach at a community college. And that was something that I had discovered as a career choice when I was at, sorry, having some technical issues here. When I was a student at Glendale, and getting involved in different organizations, student government, that it gave me a lot of hands-on experience and understanding of how the community college system works. I don't know, Birdie, are you able to share my slide? I don't know if you're able to access it. Just so they can see my talking points, and I also keep me in point, so I don't talk over the 15-minute. Thank you. So I just need to figure out how to get it out. Okay, sounds good. So what while she sets that up, I just want to give you a sense of what I want to talk about. And so in sharing with you my experiences, I thought I would tailor it to something strategic, as a strategic talk, and giving you perspective on how to think about if you are interested in teaching at a community college. And so, I'm very pragmatic in my approach to things, especially when it comes to employment. And the big thing is to be strategic about what it is that if you are planning on teaching at a community college. And I think the most important thing is really understanding the community college system. And, you would think that that's a given, right, for teaching candidates, but you'd be surprised that when we do hiring, when we have our hiring committees, that you would have candidates who are completely unfamiliar with the way the community college system works. And so my experience as a student at Glendale College, getting involved in student government, like I mentioned, I did that for a long time. I was a student body president and a student trustee. It really gave me an opportunity to get involved, sort of seeing the professional side of the house as a student because of my position. And I was able to serve in many governance committees and hiring committees. Back in the days, they allowed actually the student body president to be part of hiring committees for both faculty and classified staff hiring committees. So that was an amazing opportunity for me to kind of get a sense of how things work out. Now, I went into college at Glendale without, not at all intending on becoming a teacher, an instructor, a professor. I wanted to go into medicine, but getting a C in general chemistry was a sobering experience for me, a 5-unit class. But then again, getting involved in student government and different student organizations made me realize that I wanted a life, first of all. I didn't want, I wanted to be a surgeon initially. And after having read a book about the first woman surgeon, I was exhausted just reading her bio, her autobiography. And then realized that I wanted the life, and seeing, the people that I work with at Glendale College, the faculty members, especially having summers off, and just having this, wonderful lives, and made me realize that that's what I wanted to pursue. And so, I was very strategic in what I did at the community college as a student, and really getting involved. And so, and then, I didn't know at first that I wanted to pursue history, because there was a moment where I didn't know what I wanted to, when I decided I didn't want to become a doctor, that, what was my next path. And so I pursued a bachelor's degree in philosophy at Cal Poly. And so then, but I wanted to be at the community college level. I wanted to work there. And initially I wanted to pursue student affairs. But it was after graduating from Cal Poly and getting my first job at Glendale College as the outreach and recruitment coordinator that I realized that I didn't like the administrative side of the college, that I really enjoyed. I did a lot of workshops with high school students in recruiting for the college, and I really, really enjoyed my interaction with the students. And so I decided to defect. I always talk about defecting to the other side, to the instructional side of the house. And so while working full time at Glendale College, I applied at Cal State LA, and I have to say that it was such an amazing experience for me, that I got to work with amazing faculty members like Professor Endy and many others. And so my plan A was so I had, I'd realized, like, I'm going to pursue a teaching career, and it's going to be history because it's my first love. My favorite subject's history. And so then, in trying to figure out what areas I wanted to teach, and this is sort of being part of being strategic, and also the second part of my slide is marketability, right? Is that you really need to think about understanding the marketplace, and what classes are being offered at the community college. So I was able to, because of my job at the college, my colleagues in the social sciences department really worked with me and gave me some meaningful advice. And the best advice that they gave me while I was in graduate school was they said to look at the course offerings at a particular community college, and just get a sense of what classes are being offered. And if you are familiar with the transfer process and the transfer requirements from a community college to the Cal State and the UC system, right, the US history courses are required. They have to take that. And so, when I started graduate school, I did not want to study US history. I was just pulling my hair out. I'm like, no, I don't want to teach US history. And so I restructured, but because of the market realities, right, and that's where the jobs were, right, in US history. But also at the time, things were switching over from teaching mostly Western civilization courses to world history. And so I also took a lot of courses in Western Europe, as well as world history. So I catered my graduate program based on the job market. So, and I picked classes that I was really interested in, but I made sure that walking out of the graduate program, that I had a dossier that I would be marketable, right? One of the points that I mentioned is that you want to look at multiple areas of focus, and I don't know how much things have changed with the graduate program at Cal State LA now. Back then, we had to choose 3 areas. I ended up doing 4 areas, which was great because it really gave me such a wide breadth of areas in history to be able to teach. And one of the things that I did after I completed my graduate requirements is that I stayed a little bit longer. I think it was a year extra that I stayed to take more classes because I wanted to be marketable. I wanted to make sure that I could approach, right, Back then, I cold call. I literally walked up and I would ambush department chairs. I'd find out who they were, and I would go to the campuses and ambush them outside of classrooms and outside of meetings and introduce myself. And that's actually how I got my first job at Mount SAC. Glendale College, believe it or not, was not the first campus to give me a job. Right outside of right after graduate school, they were the second college, because I went to, I literally went door to door, and introduced myself. And I was just very lucky that at the time at Mount SAC that they were, the chair at the time was looking for adjuncts to teach classes. And, if someone comes in and tells you that they're available and they can teach certain classes, at the same time, they're looking for something, an instructor, it was really great timing on my part. But the fact that I took so many different courses in different areas, and because I didn't have a background in history, for my bachelor's degree, I had to take a year's worth of upper division courses as my prerequisite to get into the graduate program. Actually served as an advantage for me, because then it gave me a lot of units, and again, it just widened my breadth of areas to be able to teach. One of the things that I put up there from under marketability is a unit surplus for future salary placement. And this is one of the things that no one tells you. I was very fortunate, again, having, worked at Glendale, that I was familiar with the contract, the faculty contract. And I had a lot of friends who were faculty members and who, who gave me advice on all the units and such. And back then, you could take whatever classes that you can. And then when you got hired, your placement in the salary schedule will be based on your years of teaching experience and how many units you have. Again, back in the days, it was much easier to take all kinds of classes. These days, a lot of colleges, including Glendale, they require you to take upper division and specifically graduate level courses. So I was very fortunate that when I started full-time at Glendale College, I was able to go straight to the fifth column, which is the highest column in the salary placement. So those are kind of things that you want to be thinking about. And so taking all those different classes while you're in graduate school will help you be more marketable, sort of diversifying the different areas that you can teach, and it will help you with your unit load, excuse me, and salary advancement. But you want to make sure that those classes are upper division in graduate level courses. So let's see. One of the things that I skipped over under being strategic is understanding the community college job market. It's I guess the question is it hard to get a job at a community college, a full-time job? I would say that the market these days is quite difficult. It's very competitive, right? I think it's worse with COVID. How do you try to get a job? You can't really go knocking door to door and meeting the chairs, right? Emailing, right? You can email the chair and send your CV. At Glendale, I actually don't have a say-so in who to hire, because we have division chairs. I'm just a department coordinator, department chair. I don't, but I can recommend folks and I can push forward. And sometimes I sit in on committees to hire for part-timers. But when we do have full-time hires for full-time tenured faculty, I do sit in as currently I am the tenure chair for one of our new faculty. So I think for our part-time pool, the last time we hired someone was when our next one of our speakers, George, who graduated from Cal State LA, I want to say 2 years ago. He was our last part-time hire. So we haven't hired anyone since then. We've had one retiree, but we've hired 2 full-time women's historian. And so we sort of have a full slate, right? And so what does it mean for you in looking at job prospects? I would say it's very rare to get a full-time teaching job at a community college straight out of graduate school. The only person that I know who did that actually was my former classmate from Cal State LA, Elizabeth Z. I don't know if you remember her, Chris. She, right after graduating from Cal State LA, she got a job at a community college in Houston, and she's still there. So that was quite phenomenal. But I think what's most common for a lot of folks is you become a freeway flyer. That's what we're known for part-timers. And basically, you teach at multiple campuses. I think the most campuses that I taught at one time was 4. And I did like 100 miles. I would do 100 miles in one day. It was pretty insane. But you don't say no to a job. If if you have the if you have transportation, obviously, and your family situation allows for that. Back in the days, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, so I wouldn't say no to anything. The other thing that I learned was to never say no. They'll ask you, can you teach this? And even if you knew nothing, you'd say yes. And you're constantly studying, right? Part-timers are very hungry for work. And so that was one of the advice that I learned, that you never say no. So if you do take a lot of courses and you spread out your areas of interest while you're in graduate school, you have a better chance of being able to be well prepared if someone asks you, right? If you can teach a particular class, even though you know very little about it. And so I was always studying. I think I studied more after graduate school than I did, because you're having to teach all these courses: world history, Latin American history, U.S. history. One time I was offered a job teaching a 300 level class at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and it was just through the connected network of schools that I taught at, that I was asked, hey, they're looking for someone who teaches through Mexico, 300 level class. Yes, I'll take it. And then it's a whole different level, right? Dealing with university students. And that was my one and only time that I taught at a university, but it was an amazing experience. But it's not saying no. But what helped me was that I took a lot of classes at Cal State LA, before my graduate program, during my graduate program, and of course after, right? Like I mentioned, just sort of bulking up my dossier to make sure that I could just, expand my breadth as much as possible. And it's really about marketability. Now, in terms of what you teach, it's very different from teaching at, the 300 and above classes, in that you're really teaching, you're generalist, right? And so, one of the classes that I teach is world history, and I teach it from Paleolithic that's like a 100 level class that you would have, right, for your incoming freshmen, right? So Paleolithic to the 1500s, that's one class. And I teach that in an 8-week format. So it's really insane, fully online. Then the other section is 141 to, which is the 1600s to the present. That's, again, 8-week class. It's very intensive. So it's very, very general. And so that's what we are. We're generalists. And so you just, I tell my students that we're like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, because you're sampling everything. Let's see, how am I doing on time, Birdie?
I think you're good. You want to talk about the teaching assistantship and the faculty diversity internship program you have?
Right. So one of the things that I mentioned about marketability is that you want to, if you can, you want teaching experience as much as you can, right? And how do you do that while you're in graduate school? I don't know if Cal State LA still has their TA program. They do? Okay. I was able to do that a couple of quarters. I also did, I was a research assistant for Professor Schroll for 2 quarters. And those things really, really helped, right? Because that's what hiring committees are looking for, is that what kind of teaching experience do you have at the college level? Now, I hear of some graduate students who want to teach at a community college, but then they'll look for teaching opportunities at a high school level, right, to get experience. And that's fine if that's what you want. But how do hiring committees look at that? They don't really put a lot of weight in, and they'll say, okay, they have some teaching experience, but we really want someone who has some teaching experience at the college level, and preferably at the community college level. And going back to my one point up above, is that hiring committees want to see how well you know the system, how well do you know our students, right? We've had students who have PhDs who are brilliant, right, have a lot of knowledge, but completely unfamiliar with our students and our system. And this is at Glendale. I know that some community college like Santa Monica, they want folks who have PhDs, but a lot of community college, it's not a requirement, right? It's some do prefer it. But the most important thing is that the hiring committees, they look for teaching at a community college level. So that's something that you want to be thinking about. What do you do after you graduate program? While you're in it, I would highly encourage you to pursue, if it's possible for you, a teaching assistantship. It gives you real, hands-on experience in the classroom, and depending on the professor, if they'll allow you to do a couple of presentations in the classroom and to even handle collaborative work, right? And get that hands-on experience with students, it's really, really valuable. And of course, grading, right? You'll get that experience. Professor Matin, I remember those days. Oh my gosh, we'd meet at a coffee shop and I'd be pulling my hair out. Like, I have these students who just plagiarize. What do I do? How do I grade them? But those are such valuable lessons, and that you can't really get that anywhere else. The other thing that I wanted to mention is internships, and I want to put a plug in for Glendale College's faculty internship program, and I put the link up there, and it should work. And I'm sure you can get it from Professor Flager. And I think there's a deadline of March 31st, and I highly encourage you to apply for it. It is, there's a summer component and a fall component. You would be shadowing a professor where you can actually go into a classroom, I think once a week, and there is a stipend. I want to say $500, but it's a great experience. But it's only for students who have not had any teaching experience. If you've been out in the field, and then you've taught a couple of classes, you will not be eligible for that. One of our newly tenured faculty members who teaches in sociology, she actually did that program in San Diego, one of the community colleges, and she feels that it helped her land full-time gig at Glendale College. So I highly encourage you to apply for that. So March 31st deadline, next Wednesday. So please make sure to apply for that. You can't go wrong, right? In doing that program, it will really help you. And I think one last thing I want to mention, I think it's really fantastic that there is this class at Cal State LA where it helps you prepare to teach at a community college. And this is the same class, right, that George took last a couple of years ago. And
Yes.
that you come out of it, right? You come out of it, having put together a syllabus and lesson plans. I mean, George, if I may just say something about, George, when he came in to interview, I mean, he had literally a dossier, and he was just like so prepared. And we didn't have anything like that back in the days. And I remember having to Google, lesson plans and syllabi and how do you do all that stuff, and really starting from scratch. And we didn't have that kind of base knowledge. And I think you will be at an advantage compared to other graduate students who didn't go through your experience. So I think I'm at a past 15 minutes, and I want to stop there, and if there's time for Q&A later.
Thank you so much. That was just awesome, and thank you so much for sharing that internship program. It sounds so exciting, and there's even a stipend associated with it. That's wonderful. And I'm trying to look at my cheat sheet here, and I was hoping that Abby Perry can go next, sort of as historians. We go chronologically, and Abby reminded me that she graduated in 2009. So I'm just so pleased that Abby is here. She is currently an assistant professor of history in the Behavioral and Social Sciences Division at Rio Hondo College. Her teaching specialty is in United States, Native, Indigenous American, and Black American history. She's also currently developing an African American ethnic studies program and an AAADT degree at Rio Hondo College. So she earned her own degrees from San Bernardino Valley College in 2003, her bachelor's at the University of California, Riverside, 2005, and then at Cal State LA in history in 2009. And I remember working with Abby. And I think you also still did the very undignified, very stressful Blue Book comps exam.
We had laptops.
Oh, that's right. We got to rent laptops at the student union.
Yeah.
Because no one, somehow that was all, they're highly suspicious, and it had to be a laptop from the student union. Okay, progress was made though. Progress was made. And she completed a faculty internship program with San Diego State in San Diego and Imperial Valley Colleges Association in 2010. So I can't wait to hear more about that. Excuse me. Since completing her education, she has worked as a K-12 substitute teacher, a part-time college professor, first at San Jacinto College and Chaffey College, prior to accepting a full-time position at Rio Hondo College in 2015. Welcome back, Abby. So lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see everyone and great to see familiar faces. I haven't seen Dr. Indy as well since 2009. I had a few classes with you as well. I have to apologize because I'm living in a neighborhood that's undergoing construction, and it's supposed to be shut down at 5, but it seems like they're still at it today. So I hope that's not too much of a distraction in the background. So for those of you who are considering, a position in community college teaching, I say, really good on you. It's a incredibly fulfilling and rewarding profession. Not to sound cliche, I know all careers kind of say that it's rewarding and so forth. But the students that you'll encounter, right? We traditionally have students that have different challenges and have different needs than you would have at your, typically with university students. And it's just amazing to see the persistence and the attainment and just the enthusiasm of what, the attainment of an associate's degree or to transfer or to attain a certificate, what this will mean for these students' career prospects and possibilities and opportunities in their lives. I would also say community college teaching is amazing in that it's a highly autonomous occupation, I would say. I am able to pretty much shape my own schedule. It's great for, as a parent, I never have to worry about childcare. I make sure that all of my classes start after the time that I would drop off my kids at school. And I teach 2 classes. I would have office hours. Sometimes we have, committee meetings after, or division, department meetings and so forth. And I'm off of campus by 2 o'clock. Right. And I have a little bit of commute, and I come home and I pick up my kids in time to when they're leaving school. So it's quite helpful in that sense. You also, you're setting your own deadlines, and you're constructing your own courses and so forth. You're not micromanaged per se, right? So there's a lot of autonomy in that. And if that's, part of your personality, that you thrive in those sort of situations where you can set your own deadlines and so forth, I really appreciate that. And then the cherry on top, I get to talk about history all day. It's my favorite subject in the whole wide world. So it's a lot of fun. I always say that I get paid to grade, right? I teach for free because it's really just a enjoyable experience. So in preparation to teach community college, I would echo a lot of what Hazel mentioned. It's all spot on. It is a difficult kind of profession to break into the full-time tenure track positions. Even part-time, I would say, with history, being that there's a lot of history MAs, right, in the market. And so one thing to do, just echoing what she mentioned, is to market yourself. If you are interested in US history, what other areas could you attach to that to make yourself marketable? For instance, at Rio Hondo at the moment, like we keep asking administration, we want another full-time faculty hire, and we really want someone who specializes in, Far East Asian history, Middle East, and so forth, right? If we were to open it up to someone who specializes in US history, we would get 100 applications of highly qualified people. But it's when you get into the more specialized, right, areas of histories where we have the shortages. And so I would say, add that additional specialty that you can market yourself at. when I was in my last year of my master's program, I think the greatest resource I had was the faculty in the history department. Like, I had no idea how to get into community college teaching, what that would look like, what were the roles or expectations of community college faculty. And I remember, asking Dr. Flegger, particularly if I could have, a sit down meeting with her and just pick her brain and ask for advice. And she was really one of the first people to introduce me to this idea that, part of the expectation for faculty members is that they are self-educated and they're doing their own research, right? So she, advised me to look at college catalogs, what courses are being offered at the local community colleges. Look into publishers' websites. What are the current textbooks that are out on the market at this time, and that sort of thing. Build a course syllabi, right? Start with that as a foundation, even if it's kind of a rough draft. And of course, over the years of teaching, it's evolving, right? Syllabus, where you're going to add on and tweak and make adjustments to it over time. But, to have that as a starting point to think about it, right? So that was solid advice, right? From that discussion overall, I took from it, to do the research and to make a plan and to execute that plan. I also worked with Dr. Wild for my comprehensive exams. And one of my exam questions was to build a course, right, in modern US history, and discuss what themes I would select and why, what scholarship I would draw upon to inform my courses, all of that sort of stuff. And funny enough, when I finished my, or in the middle of my internship program, and I was offered a course to teach a US modern history course. And I actually went back to those notes that Dr. Wild had, me and him had worked on together for my comprehensive exam. So it was, more than just for the exams. It actually had a lot of practical, use that came out of it. So that would be a big piece of advice that I would give you all, is to really tap into and rely on the resources that you have. You have very wise and competent faculty there that can help direct you, and they network as well with community college faculty and colleges and universities. And sometimes, like at Rio Hondo, if we needed an emergency hire, and this happens frequently, right? We have a course come up and there's no one to teach that course. All of a sudden we'll go and talk to our old faculty members. Do you know a graduate student that can teach this course, right? Or someone who just finished the program that can teach this course. So I would definitely use that resource. And you might need them for your letter of recommendation. At Rio Hondo, we don't ask for letter of recommendation in our application materials, but I have applied to a number of community colleges that did ask for letter of recommendation. So it's good to have that resource and maintain that relationship with your professors, and of course, share your stories and why you aspire to go into teaching, and those sort of things. What else? For full-time faculty members, just to kind of bounce off a little bit about what Hazel said. I absolutely agree with what she mentioned. I've been on a few part-time and full-time hiring committees, and that's like the number one thing that comes out of these discussions when we're, evaluating candidates is, do they demonstrate or do they have evidence of exceptional teaching, right? And so that's one of the larger things we're looking at. It's kind of, we're tempted when we're applying to say, look at my research interests, right? And look at all of the things I've published and done, and the conferences I presented at. And just from my experience in talking with other committee members, that's kind of like, okay, that's great, but what does your teaching experience look like? They really want evidence of that, as well as that you understand the student population that we serve, right? That these are students with diverse and unique needs. And so there has to be that really strong commitment that shines through your application materials, that, you're really committed to, helping the marginalized and all these different, diverse student demographics and so forth. So I would say highlight that definitely as your application materials, if possible. The challenge too is that, when you look through the state, we don't necessarily have any, or that I know of, like formal teaching programs, right, for community college faculty. When I was a student at the community college level, I think at that time they still allowed for, if you had a teaching credential. They had teaching credentials for community college. It was like they required a bachelor's degree and the credential. But then later, I believe like when probably my last couple years or last year when I was at community college, they started to transition to phasing out the credentialed faculty, and for new hires, they required a master's degree, right? So I forgot where my point was that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I lost my point with that. But anyway, so with the teacher training programs, so there's not an abundance of it throughout the state. So it presents that challenge of, well, you're asking the applicants to have teaching experience, right? But there's no structure in place, right? There's no formal structure in place for students to acquire this knowledge and that information. So what was really incredibly helpful for me was to apply to a mentorship program in that last stages of when I was finishing up my master's program. At the time, I only remember, I remember doing a Google search and, coming up with like 2 programs that I found in Southern California. There was Project Match through the LACC district. That one by far is the most popular. It's a very highly competitive program. A colleague told me that they usually get about 700 applicants per year, and they accept about 50 interns into that program. So that one's really hard. I applied for that one, didn't get that one. And then I also applied to the San Diego and Imperial Counties Community College Association. They worked in conjunction with the Department of Education at San Diego State University. So there's a number of faculty that helped out with that program as well. And that was huge for me. That was a year-long internship. And I think we did receive some sort of small stipend, which was helpful because I was living in Upland at the time and driving to San Diego sometimes several months or several days during a month. And it was like just from these, we would have monthly sessions where you would do workshops of everything from disabled student services, this is what this program is, and veteran services, and right, every single aspect of the community college experience, and learning about shared governance and the structure all the way from the chancellor's level down to the local levels. So it was just hugely informative. There were things that I learned that I had no idea that I'd even need to know, right? So part of that, the best part of that mentorship program was that I was able to follow and shadow a faculty member, a history instructor at Mount San Jacinto College, Dr. Jim Davis. And I sat in to 1 or 2 of his classes per week. I went to committee meetings with him. He encouraged me to go around and meet, different heads of different departments and that whole thing. I was even able to sit in office hours just to, observe the interaction between professor and student. So that was incredibly helpful. From there was a number of times, like Hazel mentioned, you get opportunities to do guest lectures in the classroom. And by the end of that first semester through that mentorship program, we were offered a course. We were given a course to teach, and I would have done it for free, but they paid me. I was happy with that. So I ended up doing that modern US history class, and that was just amazing for me. And the additional benefit was he would come in and sit in lectures all the time and give me constant feedback, of what I could do to improve. So I don't think I would have been, where I'm at today in terms of I've now tenure and I'm developing a program and so forth if I didn't have that mentorship program. And especially just because there's not, it's not like K through 12 where you have credentialed programs where they teach potential aspiring teachers how to teach. It's just not existent that we've seen. So yeah, I also, I don't know if it's okay, I looked up a few mentorship programs in the region that I could find, and I was gonna put the links if anyone's interested in the chat. Okay, so that's there for everyone. Yeah, challenges. The first semester of teaching, you might question whether that's what you want to do, because you will devote an enormous amount of time and labor to developing your first course. And you're like, is this what teaching's about, right? So you will give up your weekends. You'll be working on these many hours during the day, putting together your syllabi and all of that. And just don't get discouraged, because it gets easier, right? Once you have that course developed, you can just make revisions to it as time goes on, right? It's only when you're developing that new course, you're going to put in a lot of time and energy to that. And I think that's being an adjunct professor, where I was not making, all that great of a wage at that time, and I was developing these new courses. I'm like, really, is this what I want to do? But it does get a lot easier. But yeah, there are definitely those challenges. I don't want to repeat too much of what Hazel mentioned, but there is the freeway flying is real. I live in Claremont now, and I was driving from Claremont to teach at Mount San Jacinto at the Menifee campus. And then I would also go to their San Jacinto campus to teach an afternoon class. And then I would teach an evening class in Rancho Cucamonga at Chafee. And that was my daily commute. So I was putting, hundreds of miles on my car every week. So that is a very real experience. And you do take whatever class that they offer you. There was at Mount San Jacinto College, I was offered a world history class, and I was discussing with the chair. I'm like, that's not in my background. I'm like, I teach US history. I don't really want to teach world history. And she's like, it's fine. You know more than the students. It's fine. And this was like 3 weeks before the class started. So I was prepping this class frantically, trying to be ready for the beginning of the fall semester, teach this world history class that I had one undergrad course in many years prior to that. So there are those experiences that can be discouraging at times, but ultimately I think the benefits of the experiences with these students are very receptive to community college faculty. They can sense you genuinely care, and that their successes, right, or your successes. And so it's really quite fulfilling. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Abby. I enjoy your world history adventure there. That's great. And yep, that's the number one rule, right? You always know more than the students, at least, well, most of the time. I've also been in seminars where some of the students clearly knew more about a particular topic, and then, you can make them the teachers, and I always learn from students as well. Thank you so very much. Let's see, I'm not sure chronologically whether George or Ben graduated first. Do you know, Chris?
Wasn't it around the same time, Ben? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I graduated May of 18. I think you weren't until the end of the year.
Okay. So Ben is first. He has seniority.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go with chronology here. So love to see Benjamin Baca. Benjamin is now an adjunct faculty member at Victor Valley College and Norco College. And he received his bachelor's degree in history from Cal State LA in 2016 and his master's in history in 2018, as we just heard, in May. During his time at Cal State LA, he worked with me as a peer facilitator for History 2010, which used to be 202A. And he was also a graduate assistant for me. He worked as a special feature editor for volume 43 of Perspectives, and he was one of the editors in chief for volume 45. And he has been at Victor Valley College and Norco College since 2019, and he teaches early American history and California history for them. And I can't wait to hear about how it's been going. Thank you, Benjamin, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Flager. It's been going. So I don't want to retread what Abby and Hazel have already said. I just want to add a few things. Something that I think is very important for people who are looking for different positions is to apply beyond their comfort zone. I went to Cal State LA for 6 consecutive years, but I lived in San Bernardino County, so I commuted the entire time. And something that Dr. Chatterjee had told me when I was getting to the end of the program is to apply to schools that are further east, because if there's too many people with the same master's degree all concentrated in Los Angeles, there aren't going to be as many people in the schools in San Bernardino. Victor Valley is in Victorville, which is in the high desert. So they're kind of in need of a lot of different faculty. I got really lucky. Luck is kind of a factor. I counted. I have a little notepad on my phone that says when did I apply for a job and when did they say no, and I have 65 rejections before I was able to get one. So there is a factor of luck, and you know, if you apply to the more places you apply to, even if they may be geographically pretty far from where you live or where you're comfortable living, um, take it if that's something that you truly want to do. Another important point is to stay in contact with your professors. Uh, when I got my interview, when the interview was done and they said we're looking forward to hiring you, I made 3 phone calls or 2 phone calls and an email. I texted my fiance, I called my mother, and then I emailed Dr. Flager to send her what I already had because I had done a syllabus during the comprehensive exams at the end of my graduate program. Because I wanted to make sure what I had was as good as I could have in the time I was allowed. I think between the interview and the first day of class was 2 weeks. So they didn't give me a whole lot of time to prepare. And then when applying online, you can't really knock on doors like Hazel had said earlier, but when applying online, apply everywhere and probably apply more than once. I usually had a 6-month counter. If I applied at Pasadena in January, I'd probably hit apply again in July when the new academic year started, just so I would be one of the first applications in their pool. And then another aspect of the luck component, when I first got hired at Victor Valley, during the interview process, I was very amicable and I was having a good conversation. My interview lasted between 45 minutes and an hour, which the dean had said was a very uncommon thing. That was because when I was explaining my 5950, whatever the research paper is at the end of the program, I was a social historian. She was a social psychologist. So we ended up having a conversation between her and I that was very personable, that I think made her like me a little bit more, so that she gave me a job. That or she was really desperate. I'm not entirely sure still. But once you get that position, it's difficult for me to say how hard it is versus it isn't, since I was rejected 65 times, but I also got accepted within the course of a year of graduating. I also never went to community college before applying. I graduated high school. I went to Cal State. I did my master's degree. I graduated, and then 8 months later, I was a professor, which was weird to even say out loud. But when you're building your class, the one thing that I always want to impart to people who are looking into college teaching is teach the class that you would want to be a student in. Everyone has taken a class that they dreaded going to, or the teacher was not very engaging, or they were monotonous, or they had readings that weren't very fun. Don't be that person, because you don't have to be that person. You can assign whichever readings that are topically appropriate. You can give whatever kinds of assignments you want to. You don't have to necessarily, at least in my experience, you don't have to assign a textbook. That I tell students, I don't assign a textbook. You're not going to read it. You're going to spend $100 to buy it, put it on your bookshelf until the end of the semester, and then refund it. So there's no point in me assigning a textbook. Instead, read a bunch of small primary sources instead, so you get a better understanding of what it is that I want you at least to take away from this. When I was, I think I was a sophomore there, I took a class with Dr. Byrick, and he had a model that I really liked, where you took 2 midterms. The higher of the 2 midterms was the midterm that went to your final grade. So if you scored 80% on your first one and you're fine with an 80, then you don't even necessarily have to do the second one. If you scored 2 points correctly, then take the second midterm. And if you take both, whichever higher is goes to that. And that was something that from, that would have been in 2013. Since I took that class, is like, if I become a college professor, I'm going to do that. And now they had their midterm last week, my students actually. And that's still something that I still do for them, because, and something that Dr. Flager imparted to me when I was a graduate program, is life happens. So if you can't do the midterm because, it's COVID times and the world's on fire, then if you can't get around to it, then the second one's a time for you to be able to make it up. If you don't particularly like, if a student doesn't particularly like the early discovery settlement period of early American history, then they're probably not going to do as good on that section as they would on the American Revolution portion of the class. So I like to impart that students are people, and I'm also a person too, which they find weird that I have to point that out, because I am not here to trick you. I'm not here to trip you up. I want you to succeed, but you also have to put in part of the effort. Something that Abby was mentioning a little bit ago was to continually be researching and finding new information to add to a class. In fall, I got hired to do a California history class, which I had never taught before. And during my tenure at Cal State LA, I had never taken that course before. So I didn't know where to start. I just started scrawling things on a piece of paper and then built it out from there. What was a benefit to me is I kept most of my books and journals and articles and the things from my time at Cal State. And I was like, oh, I could use this. I could use this. And then I would contact people. I think I contacted George and some of my other colleagues when I was at Cal State and be like, is there anything that you can recommend to me? Because I have no idea and I'm working from the ground up. And I was doing a lot of those the fall was a rough semester because I was doing somewhere between 8 and 12-hour days building a class that I had never taught, I had never taken, and I didn't have any guidance because it was COVID and I had none of my current colleagues to bounce ideas off of. So continue to read and research and think about things, but think about the things that you like. Don't spend a lot of time looking at Marxian history of the American Revolution. Do the part that you would think is going to be far more enjoyable for you or more enjoyable for a student. It still has to be academic. It still has to be involve critical thinking, but it doesn't have to be as dry, especially since many people, when I say, oh, I'm a history professor, most people roll their eyes, as they did when I said I was a history major. So I try to make things as interesting as possible for as many people as possible. And I can't do that for everybody, but I try. Another important aspect, I think, is autonomy, that you can build the classes however you want, do whatever readings, do whatever assignments you want to, schedule it however you want to. If you prefer to give them just small assignments, peppered over the course of the semester, that works. If you prefer to give them large critical thinking essays, that works also. If you prefer textbooks, if you prefer small readings, if you prefer large group discussions, if you prefer small group discussions, all of those things are entirely up to you, and no one's going to come and say, you can't do that because that's not how we do it. Every department chair that I've had so far has said, as long as you're doing your job, we're not going to tell you how, just do it well and don't have anyone complain, which I've been doing pretty good so far. And again, I get to talk about history, which I convinced someone to pay me for me to be able to talk at length. I have no idea how that happened, but I'm doing a pretty good job considering I still haven't gotten fired. And then I think the last thing would be just to build on things that you already like. I never had an interest in teaching California history, but I knew the things that I already knew and worked from there. So if you were to teach early American history or recent American history, you're going to you would hopefully be able to find some aspect of those fields and say, this is the part that I really, really like. How much can I do with this? And, there's going to be some days where it's like, this is not my favorite lecture. You'll get through that hour and a half class or that 3-hour class that you have on that particular day, and then you'll continue on your way. But then you'll be really excited for when you look through, the antebellum slavery period and you look at the movie 12 Years a Slave, or, when you start looking at the intricacies of the American Revolution and all the dynamics that go in there, because you can teach the class however you want to and focus on the parts that you enjoy the most. Something else that I would recommend as students is to hold on to the books, old readings, and old assignments, because those have been an absolute lifesaver for me. When I took the history of the Civil War class my junior year at Cal State, I tucked all the papers away and said, I might look at these again. And they've come in really handy. Letters from General Sherman during 1864, different correspondence between Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. There were a lot of things that perhaps I didn't even necessarily read when I was a student that came in very handy when I was an instructor. And I think that's all my bullet points.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. So I guess I'll introduce our fourth and final speaker. And here we have, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to George Scriabin, who graduated from our program, as you just heard, in fall of 2018. So George started his higher education at Glendale City College and then transferred to UCLA, where he got his bachelor's degree in history in 2014. And from there, he then came to Cal State LA. He was an officer in Phi Alpha Theta. He was, I know he did lots of things in the department. He was also a student in the very first section of History 5800 back in the fall of 2018, where, you know, as Hazel mentioned, he did work on a portfolio for a U.S. history class. Since graduation, he has been teaching as an adjunct faculty member at Glendale City College and at Santa Monica College. He's also been running, I don't know if he still does this or not, but he has experience with tutoring and private tutoring. And so he's got an entrepreneurial side as well as the educational side. So let's welcome back to Cal State LA, George Scriabin.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me okay, that my microphone is working. Thank you very much for all the other guest speakers, Hazel, Abby, and Benjamin, and of course for the department welcoming me back. So, you know, first of all, I suppose everyone that's here either has some inkling maybe to teach at a community college level or anything else. I believe when we took 5800 with Dr. Endy, the initial idea was to kind of have students get a different ballpark of different type of jobs and careers, et cetera. And so at least if you're interested in teaching or the CC level, hopefully I can illuminate a little bit of the experience for you. And so just like Dr. Endy said, I was a community college student myself, and then got my bachelor's, went to Cal State LA for my master's, and so on and so forth. If Dr. Flager could pop up my little slide, that'd be much appreciated, because I do have some bullet points and I want to stay on topic. And I believe I have around 15 minutes, if I remember correctly, so I can hopefully stay on topic. So I'll time myself. Oh, there we go. Boom. So once it loads up. Alrighty, there we go. I try to put in a GIF there, so hopefully it comes across with a little gladiator action, and of course, aliens from the History Channel. But anyways, I do teach at Glendale and SMC, and so I suppose the first place to start is discussing your own graduate program and what you are doing currently. And after that, trying to get into, let's say, the marketability aspect. Where do you go from there as far as looking for work? And then how is the actual lifestyle, right, of being an adjunct professor? So currently in your graduate program, I specifically remember when I was sitting in Dr. Flager's office and she was my graduate advisor, I initially wanted to sort of specialize in ancient history because that was my UCLA specialization with Egypt, Greece, Rome, the Middle East, etc. And she gave me some very wonderful advice. She said, if you want to work, go into US history. And so at the time, I did not really necessarily understand the meaning of those words, but slowly I was doing my own research. And very quickly, you could just go online and, let's say, type in 5, 6, 7 different community colleges and what courses they offer in history, right? And so very quickly, I ended up finding out that she was correct. The majority of courses were US based. And then let's say the second most available were world history. And then a few niche courses here and there, right? Whether it was ancient history or African or Chicano, studies, et cetera. And typically now that I'm working as faculty, I'm noticing that those niche courses are more times than not, but not exclusively, but more times than not, let's say taught by full-timers. So as an adjunct, you could get those courses, but let's say if you only specialize in those, you're sort of rolling the dice. And so once you're in your program, and you're all in your program right now, and you're hopefully going to finish soon, obviously you're going to get your substantive knowledge from your history courses and your readings and your essays and everything you're doing. The department is wonderful in that manner. As far as 5800 is concerned, in the first semester that we had with Dr. Endy, he was gracious enough to allow us to sort of cater our final projects in a flexible manner. And so I'm more of a sort of realistic, pragmatic person. And so it was closer towards my comp exams and my final semester. So I really wanted to, let's say, build, application materials, get my syllabus ready, my statement of purpose, get a portfolio, right? So I could really just impress whatever department I was in front of. And so thankfully, with a lot of aid and some edits from Dr. Endy and suggestions back and forth, I was able to get a portfolio. So I highly recommend everyone towards the end of your program to start really gearing up for that, because I did graduate in fall 2018. I believe I got my online diploma January of 2019. And then I applied, just very similar to how Ben said he applied to a lot of schools. I applied to 22 different schools. I only heard back from 2. And so try to have a very wide, broad net as far as applying goes, because, teaching positions at a college not open up often, right? And so you just kind of have to have a very wide web. And so during that process, definitely everyone touched upon this. Keep up your connections, keep up your networking. Thankfully, and somehow life just kind of threw us into this unique situation. Hazel Ramos was my own professor all those years ago when I was at community college. And so when I was already applying and Glendale was on my radar as well, I was asking if they have any hiring positions open, et cetera. And then, something ended up panning out as far as that. So you never know what's going to happen. So definitely keep in touch with as many people as you can. And of course, as soon as I had the interview and I sat down with Hazel and I sat down with, I believe it was Richard Kamei, another wonderful faculty we have, but they were my, interviewers. I was the interviewee. And of course I have my portfolio there. I made everything look super professional, printed on, special paper, right? A special folder for every one of them to have. And, it really impressed them, and I had everything laid down. Now, aside from having a good CV, right, which is your academic resume, application materials, please get used to interview skills, right? Hard skills, soft skills, looking people in the eye, shaking hands. I came dressed, nicely with a blazer and a tie, right? Try to, first impressions are typically very important. Afterwards, it was maybe halfway through my first semester, I bumped into Richard Kamei, one of the interviewers that I had for Glendale. And I think I was just wearing a polo shirt or something. I'm not in a suit and tie, but I was just wearing a polo shirt, just a regular day of work, I suppose, in an evening course. And then he just says, "Oh, George, you're always looking sharp. I remember during an interview, you looked so nice." And then he's like, "All right, take care." So, those first impressions really kind of stick with people, right? So all of those hard and soft skills, definitely try to get that down. I'm not sure if History 5800 still has those mock interviews. I remember we did that in Dr. Endy's office, which is great. I got a thumbs up from Dr. Endy. They were great, and we got a lot of pointers as far as those soft skills go. So those are definitely handy, and I utilize some of them myself. As far as, let's say, some of your classes go, for example, during the interview process, of course, it's sort of going without, you don't have to really state it, but you have your master's. So they are assuming you have the actual expertise of knowing your subject and you're able to teach in that subject to a certain degree, right? That's sort of laid on the table. Additionally, on top of that, typically at Glendale and especially at Santa Monica, because they were a little bit more picky in terms of my interview, I had, I believe, 8 or 9 interviewers in front of the entire history department, and they grilled me for like an hour and a half. So it was a little brutal, but you know, if you have anything in terms of teaching methodologies, right, something a little more cutting edge, for example, bottom-up history, you know, specialized group work that you want to do, something new has been decolonizing history, right, or especially key buzzwords right now are diversity, equity, right, in learning. Anything at the forefront of the research, they would love to see. And you know, right before you enter into those type of interview situations, just a couple hours of trying to do your own research and Googling, you know, some sort of modern, sort of cutting edge sort of history sort of methodologies would behoove you, I think, because it impressed my Santa Monica committee that I was talking a few of these keywords as well. And so it definitely allowed for me to get my foot in the door. And as an adjunct professor or anyone wanting to get an education, that's the first step. Get your foot in the door, right? And then trying to, you know, work as hard as you can. As far as the actual work that, you know, you do as an instructor, I believe others have said this as well. It is a very nice schedule because it is flexible. You have your own freedom in your course, right, to kind of structure things that way that you want to structure them. I have asked and I collaborated with a lot of my colleagues, especially the more, you know, seniored ones that taught in the specific courses that I'm teaching in, whether it's US, world, or at Santa Monica. They love giving me sort of like ethnic identity, immigration history of the US. And so I asked a lot of my senior colleagues, you know, what type of texts they used, how they wanted to teach various materials, et cetera. I took all of that and tried to sort of make it my own. And so as you're sort of navigating through that, you know, you're going to enjoy a loose schedule, freedom in, you know, your own coursework. And it's, you know, it's a beautiful thing, right? I love the dynamicness of every single semester, right? Every single semester I have new students, you know, new settings. You know, I try to update my lectures as much as possible, right? However much extra time I do have in my schedule. Because as Dr. Andy mentioned previously, I'm a little bit of an entrepreneur, but I'll get to that during my financial sections, I suppose, my bullet points. And so, yeah, definitely, it's a great life. But some of the real world concerns that I do want to kind of get into. So let's say you finally get your foot in the door, right? You graduated from Cal State LA. You are preparing all of your job materials and your CV and everything. Out of all the schools you applied for, one, two, maybe three, if you're lucky, say yes, and you get your interview, and then boom, you know, you're signing the paperwork at HR, the very surreal experience of actually becoming a faculty, right? The real world experience is this, you know, especially your first semester, you have zero amount of lecture prepared or slides prepared or anything. And so you're working from the ground up. So my first semester, typically, I think the adjunct experience is getting 1 or 2 classes here and there, 3 maybe, something like that, right? Kind of getting your foot in the door. My first semester, I had 5. And then during the winter, I had 2 or 3. And then spring, another 5. And then COVID hit. And during the summer, the intersession, usually 1 or 2 classes is, you know, normal for an intersession. I had 5 during last summer. I mean, just back to back to back. So thank God I have a good amount of work coming my way, but it was definitely long, long hours of hard work. On top of that, somehow you're trying to balance all of the hours of lecturing and grading and everything else you're doing and, you know, preparing materials. Try to get involved in as many things as you can because since you are going to be an adjunct instructor, the sort of name of the game is obviously do the best job that you can in terms of being a good instructor, making an engaging class for your students, hopefully get that rate my professor score up as high as it can go, right? Too bad they got the chili peppers off, but that's beside the point. Anyways, so, you know, try to be the best instructor that you can, but let's say finally somebody in like 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years, someone retires, right? And there's an open full-time position available at the college. So you're like, okay, great. It's you versus a whole host of other folks, including people with master's degrees, PhDs, maybe some folks from out of state. So it becomes very competitive. And the one home field advantage that you have is that if you worked long enough at your specific college, hopefully people know your face, they know your name, they know the products of your work, right? And what kind of work ethic you bring to the table. And so try to get involved in perhaps the academic senate, maybe be an advisor for a couple of clubs, do some extra work on the side so that no matter who is going to be on your hiring committee for that college, hopefully a few of them already know you from all of the extra engagement that you do. Because the hiring committees are not necessarily all within the history department. You could have maybe one or two historians, you'll have somebody from like econ, you'll have someone from admin or whatever. It just, sometimes it's spread out. So you really have to kind of, get your name out there. As far as, let's say, the real world applications, become an amazing commuter. They call adjuncts the sort of, what was the nickname? Freeway flyers, right? So when everything finally opens up again and we're back to in person, if you're teaching at 2, 3 colleges, God forbid 4 colleges or campuses or whatever, you're going to be doing a lot of commuting. So get ready to listen to podcasts. Hopefully your butt doesn't get sore from all the hours of sitting and whatever other modern challenges present themselves. But that's sort of the name of the game, but you'll schedule everything fine. Hopefully all of you get work moving forward, right? That's sort of the main thing that I would hope for. But in terms of, let's say, finances, as an adjunct, it is difficult sometimes to stay afloat. I remember it was still during the application process, and I was talking with Hazel about it. I believe she said when she was adjunct back in the day, she needed to supplement her income a little bit, right? Doing other various side hustles. I've been tutoring for a number of years privately. And so slowly over time, developed my clientele. Once I got my master's and I had the coveted professor, quote unquote, title, right? You could charge a little bit more for some of the clients. And so it's definitely been helping to supplement and bolster my income on the side on top of everything else that I do. Which is insane to think about, because right now for this semester, for example, I have 5 classes and then a 6th class starting at the end of the semester. I'm still tutoring here and there, wherever I can. I'm like a DE or a distance education mentor for Santa Monica for our history department. And so that means that I'm helping a lot of the co-faculty develop their Canvas shells, online materials, YouTube lectures, whatever else, because as you can imagine, some of the older faculty had a bit of difficulty during the COVID transition, right? Oh, my slides are not up, but that's fine. We're pretty much done anyways. And so, yeah, I have a lot of stuff on my plate, but let's say if you are in the situation where you are applying for adjunct work and you only get, let's say, 1 or 2 classes under your belt and that's it. You can't get up to 5 or 6 or something along those lines. It can become pretty difficult, because I could imagine if you're putting in all that hard work and let's say you're only making like $900 a month, 14, 15, whatever, $100 a month, just doing a couple of courses, you might start to kind of lose hope a little bit. So definitely kind of supplement income wherever you can. Try to get as many courses as you can from the colleges. And that's sort of like both a lucky lottery system, but also you putting yourself out there, putting your best foot forward, trying to really kind of, get as many classes as you can. And then it's a waiting game, waiting for a position to open for full time. And then for you to apply for it, and hopefully all of the various things that I said in terms of work experience, being active on campus, et cetera, all of that pays off. Because that is sort of at the end of my slide, I put high risk, high reward. So it's high risk in terms of, yeah, you have to bust your butt for a few years as an adjunct, right? And kind of, I suppose, pay your dues, right? As they say, and put in the hard work. But the high reward is, let's say you finally get one of the coveted professor positions. Technically, you don't have to work during the summer. That's like 3 months off. And then winter intersession, that's another month off. So it's like 3 to 4 months off where you can do travel, you can relax mentally, work on your course materials, etc. Right now as an adjunct, I don't really want to go like 3 to 4 months of the year without income, because that's just not something that is on my plate of things I want to do. And so I always teach intersessions. So that means what, you have maybe 5 days sometimes of break in between big semesters. So mentally it can get a little draining. So I would highly recommend for everyone to sort of have a lot of the realities in mind. It's very fun and rewarding. during the good moments, and especially when I'm writing letters of recommendation for students and they come back and they say, hey, we loved your class, or I'm reading some very positive my professor reviews or whatever else that they had, to say about my class, right? It's very rewarding in that aspect. I love to teach. I was even telling Hazel recently, because at the end of this summer, it'll be like 2 full years that I've been teaching. And so especially because of the introductory work I had to do as an adjunct. And then once we transitioned to online, that was a whole new level of stuff that I had to do, right? In terms of like converting lectures, it can get a little tiring. So the whole notion of what do they call it? Teacher burnout, right? Is definitely something to be well aware of. So probably this semester, and I think winter, this previous semester, I've been trying to have a bit more work-life balance, right? To stay sane as much as I can. That's mental health is also important. But yeah, I mean, I'm staying very hopeful for full-time work moving forward, because although for me personally, and I'll just be transparent about this because we're all talking about job markets, right? And trying to get work after we graduate. So I talked to the GCC sort of division chair, and he's like, listen, George, honestly speaking, we already hired a few full-timers, so it's not looking great, but they have like this new high school dual enrollment program that I'm teaching as well. So potentially if that program expands a little bit more, they might have some flexibility and funding come in. Who knows? Santa Monica, my chair straight up told me, he's like, they got absolutely wrecked because of COVID, and SMC took like a $13 million budget hit. So thankfully my job was still safe and secured, because I was one of the last adjuncts that they hired in, but that's the reality of college and the situation from the state, right? But he said, hey, if like we have the funding in a couple of years, like I want to hire 2 or 3 more full-timers, right? That's something that I'm looking for. And so a lot of my energy now has been geared towards Santa Monica by being a DE mentor and helping other faculty with their Canvas shells and doing all of that kind of work. Speaking of DE mentor stuff, for all of you, if you are getting into teaching, especially now because of COVID, obviously, and the online nature of things, get some type of online credential to teach. I don't know whether this is a matter of just, crazy good luck that I had, or whether God is looking after me, right, in a good positive way or something. I got in fall 2019 as my first semester to teach. And then both Hazel and my Santa Monica chair, they kind of just alluded to the fact that, hey, like we think online is going to be like, it's going to get bigger and bigger. It would behoove you to get some online training to be certified by the state. And so I had a gut feeling. I'm like, you know what? I might as well get rid of it early. So winter, right before, 2020 really kind of hit, I got my official accreditation and et cetera by the state. I was like ready to teach online. And then boom, February, COVID hits, shutdowns, the whole 9 yards. And so especially when that surfaced, I was one of the first kind of go-tos at Santa Monica for them to kind of like lean on me as a crutch. So hopefully that gave me a little bit more, I suppose, street cred, with the co-faculty there. Time will tell. So hopefully I can speak to all of you in a few years and be like, boom, I got the full-time position, folks, right? And kind of do a little dancey dance. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely moving forward, if you can, try to get some online accreditation. I think that's going to be huge. And so the entire COVID situation, although terrible, has taught us that online is definitely viable to a certain extent, right? And the colleges know it too. So they might be investing more resources into that later on. Like I invested in a whole PC setup. I got like my microphone and boom mic, like I record my lectures for YouTube. Hopefully my quality kind of comes through, right? With the camera right now, instead of being pixelated. So I'm definitely trying to put my best foot forward, right? I'm still trying to imagine myself on that first day, right? During the interview process as an adjunct, but now still trying to get full-time. So the hustle is always there. Hustle is always real. But yeah, just work hard, keep your nose to the grindstone. Things work out to those that put in a good amount of effort and hard work, and people see that and they notice it. At least that's been my experience so far. But yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. It's been a privilege and an honor to speak to all of you. Hopefully it was illuminating in some sort of way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. That's amazing. And yep, George, I knew that good things were going to happen. We really miss your camera, by the way, and your professional photography for perspectives right now. Anyway, let's open the floor to everyone's questions.
I'll go if no one else has got anything. Thanks for coming out, by the way, guys. I appreciate it. I was just wondering how your respective community colleges have handled COVID in the past couple of semesters, if they've done anything that you've really liked or maybe otherwise, I don't know.
I'm happy to answer that. Glendale College was actually well prepared to, transition into online teaching, when we shut down, because we've had a thriving distance ed program for the last few years. And so there were still some faculty members who, our main learning management system is Canvas, right? But there's still some faculty, I don't know, the Luddites, they didn't want, they still refused to use Canvas, right? So I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I ended up being one of the, the coaches to help transition some of those in our division, because we were lucky in that we had, unlike Abby, I cannot even imagine that you had that weekend. We shut down for a full week in preparation for this, and we were given, the week before we left the college, we had an emergency faculty meeting with the admin heads, and they let us know what was upcoming. And so we were sort of anticipating a shutdown, thinking we'll come back on Monday and we'll pack up, but we never did. We haven't been back since. But because we already had a built-in DE program, and we have some really amazing, innovative faculty at Glendale College who are tied to @ONE. It's one of the California State Community Colleges training system, and they really helped in transitioning. And our DE team is amazing. They provide a lot of professional development for faculty members that really help transition. And there's some also really strong divisions at Glendale, especially the social sciences, and a lot of very innovative faculty that really stepped up to make sure that everyone got whatever training that they needed. And so the college has been, amazing in helping us transition because of an existing DE program we've had for many years.
Thank you.
Maybe in the interest of time, let's see if we can get as many questions as we can going here. I see, Chris, you put a question in the chat, and I think George, you've already typed an answer in the chat also. So we've got multiple channels of communication going. But yeah, let's see if we can hear from as many students as possible to get some questions out there.
Can I answer the second question that Christopher brought up? So he says, did your students have challenges accessing technology to go online? Did the colleges help with that? So that was a huge initial challenge that we were considering, because some students that we have, let's say, they don't have the funds for like a brand new MacBook Pro, right? Or a spanking new iPhone or whatever. And a lot of students, sometimes they require the Wi-Fi and the, let's say the computer lab and everything else that the college provides. So once everything was shut down and you could not go to the campuses physically, that created a barrier problem for some. We were talking about that as departments. And so we tried to make it as accessible as possible in terms of just what materials we're posting up, what's accessible on your computer, but also via mobile. So at Santa Monica, for example, I was a huge advocate of them incorporating something that GCC started, which is our Pronto app. So it's like a nice application for your phone. You could have like classroom interactions, etc. Even when I was helping, let's say, Canvas and course shell development, I was trying to convert as much stuff into PDFs as I could, making more accessible and readable as far as a technology standpoint. And just, not having just everything based off of Canvas exclusively, because sometimes, students can't open it up on their phones or whatever, right? Even myself recently, because a few of the faculty were asking me, of recording lectures, right, and putting it up on Canvas or whatever else. Sometimes on your phone or even on your computer, it gets wonky trying to access videos that you upload exclusively to Canvas. So for the last couple of semesters, I've been uploading my lectures to YouTube because, as we all know, you can watch YouTube on your laptop, on your tablet, on your phone. It works everywhere, right? And so I've been sort of trying to have others join my trend, although some of the older professors are apprehensive of being public and hopefully being, I don't know, having their work vetted. But yeah, it's definitely been presenting a few challenges, but Santa Monica and Glendale, as far as I'm concerned, did a great job. They provided resources. I believe SMC and I think Glendale both, they were actually having Google Chromebook handouts. So a few of my students reached out to me and I wrote them specific, let's say, recommendations to the departments, and they just started giving them free semester sort of rentals of Google Chromebooks for them to use at home as well. So they really kind of tried to, work as best as they could. They opened up the parking lots for Wi-Fi and, extended it that way because a few of my students, they're in and out of homelessness a couple of times. You get a whole wide range of people that need to take college courses. So overall, I think they did the best that they could have given the very short time frame that we had, because it was literally mid-semester. We started for what, a month and a half, and then boom, shutdowns during spring break, and then the other half or 3/4 of the course in spring was just online. So
if I could answer Christopher's question regarding, whether one should apply. It's a great question, Christopher. Should you apply for a position while in graduate school? My experience at Glendale has been that once, HR processes all of the paperwork, and if they see that you don't have the minimum quals, you won't make it to the interview. So, I wouldn't recommend that. But the networking part, I would that was going to be, when I revisited your question, I saw that would be my advice, is that if you can, and if you have any contacts at a particular community college, I mean, now you do. If you didn't have one already, you have me. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is hazelr@glendale.edu, and let me know, your connection to the course at CalStat LA, and George, and then you've met Abby and you've met Benjamin, and so you have those contacts. And I would really, and don't just reach out once, because I get so many emails. I get so many emails, various prospective faculty members wanting, and I forward them to the division chairs, because but if you develop any kind of professional connection with somebody, it really does help, because if anything, they can give you insight, at least on the process, and just and having someone to go to, other than, and your professors may know other contact at a particular community college. But highly recommend it. I cannot emphasize enough. If I had not kept in touch with my colleagues, I mean, I worked at Glendale, fortunately, but if I did not have my connections at Glendale, I would not be where I am now. But I can't say enough how important networking is. So yes, definitely.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Of course.
I had a
Can
question.
I jump in and ask?
Oh.
Okay, go first.
Yeah. Hi, George. Great to see you again. You were at the PAT banquet last year. You spoke. I really enjoyed your story. Great to hear you're also doing successful as well. Now, you mentioned you also mentioned online credential program. What was the name of it again? Did you say it was the DE Mentor, or what was it again?
it's called the credentials that you need for the community college is called @1. So it's like @1 programs. It's officially sanctioned and recognized by the state of California. And it's the one that they utilize throughout the community colleges, whether it's Glendale, Santa Monica, or others. So I finished a whole course round of @1, and then you get like official certification. After that, you just need a few hours here and there per year just to kind of maintain your credential, similar to like a real estate license or whatever, but you don't have to take like a whole course again, you just have to maintain it. But yeah, it's @1. And then my position, was sort of like a little sub position with a little bit of financial kickback, nothing too crazy. At Santa Monica, it's called the DE Mentor, the Distance Education Mentor, that I have there.
Great, thank you very much.
I would like to ask, because I know that many of you mentioned that just take whatever you can and teach as much as you can. And at the same time, some of you mentioned that, for example, you are looking for a person with some special interest, let's say for Asian history or something. So how should I balance it in my letter of purpose? Should I even open that and say what my area of interest is, or should I leave it like without even mentioning that? Because I don't want to like put myself in the position that I would say I can do whatever you want, even though that I don't have even background or knowledge. And at the same time, I don't want to close like doors, because I would say, okay, so my area of interest or specialization is this and that. How should I handle with that?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how all colleges handle that. I know with Rio Hondo in particular, like for our history department, we've been talking about this for a number of years, that we want someone with that area of specialty. We would actually tailor the job description, the job announcement, to say we're looking for, we'll say minimum qualifications, a master's in history. And we'll say preferred qualifications, someone with a specialty in, Asian history or whatnot, whatever it would happen to be. And I know that our history department does that, but I know that every department kind of sends their own sort of description that they want to send to the HR department. So if it's so much different, local control at Rio Hondo, I'm not sure if Glendale, same thing, if you guys have that sort of local control within your departments where you get to tailor the job description and so forth. But if it is tailored, definitely speak to that, right? Like write your application materials where you're directly speaking to, those preferred qualifications. Absolutely.
I can jump in a little bit as well. So I completely understand the concern. You don't want to sort of close any doors and put yourself in pigeonhole in a certain sort of area. I would probably recommend, well, let me just ask, Jan, what's your preferred area or specialization that you're considering?
World history, Western civilization, European history.
Okay, fantastic. So from those, because the highest number of courses typically offered are US, and then it's world and Western Civ or some combination, and then a lot of niche courses. So I would recommend putting in, let's say, US and world or some combination of those as like the big ones, and then a sub bullet point, which I did myself also. Let's say other specializations, and then put in something specific with like, I specialize in European economics, I specialize in Western civilization developments from the Greco-Roman period or whatever it is. My subspecialties was ancient history. That's what I did in my BA at UCLA, and that's what I love. To this day, they still have yet to give me Western Civ or ancient courses on mass. So I'm hoping one day I can bring back the classics or the Greco-Roman period, but it might be wishful thinking. Maybe if I'm a full-timer, I could coerce them, or maybe for some Russian history, because I'm half Russian myself. So I want to bring back that Tsardom a little bit, but we'll see. Oh, Dylan has a question in the chat, I think got overlooked. I think Berta also put that in there. Is there a different level of instructor-student engagement that's necessary when teaching history at CCs as opposed to universities? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I'd love to say something, just my experience in hiring committees and what it is that we're looking for in candidates. And we really want to see someone, an instructor that can connect well with students, right? And how do you do that? How do you find the balance between providing, teaching and doing a lecture, right? Lecture style, traditional way of teaching, but being able to engage your students in a classroom in a collaborative manner. That's really, really, really important because it's going to make you stand out. When you do your teaching demonstration for a full-time interview, they want to, you have to treat the hiring committee members as students. So they want to see how you would perform in a classroom. In one of my interviews at Mount SAC many years ago, they actually brought in students as part of the interview process. So there was the teaching demonstration that I had to do in front of the committee, but then I also had to do one that included both the committee members and the students, and they really wanted to see me in action. And so it's like that engagement and being able to make that connection, and how well you're able to draw. Like I am not I don't do traditional lectures in my classes. I do a lot of collaborative work and a lot of discussion, and anything to get my students to talk. And Benjamin said it, that you get paid to talk about history. And I tell my students, I get paid to talk to my students about history, right? And I think that's really, really important. I know at Glendale, we really look for candidates that isn't just, we kind of had the sense that, many people can lecture, but how, we want candidates that can really engage students. And so that's really been my experience, in that looking for candidates that can draw out the students and get them to participate and get them to talk in the classroom and make history alive. And that, a student-centered faculty member, that's what it is that we're looking for, instead of, like that faculty member who's the center, right, of who's a star. At Glendale, we'll look for faculty candidates who has a student-centered mindset into teaching. So I would say that really focusing on being able to teach in a collaborative manner and to do discussion work is really, really important at the community college level.
All right. Thank you so all very much for all of this wonderful information, for your questions. Do we have any more questions?
Can I have one more? Mm-hmm. And also, when I would be writing my letter of purpose, and I would be applying for adjunct positions. Is it good to like open something that in future I hope to like get a full-time position, or not at all? That like the committee would be afraid that I'm seeking to steal a job from full-time faculty. So should I just like stick that I am right now in a position looking for adjunct, but no future plans?
No, you don't necessarily have to be concerned with anyone thinking you're going to steal their jobs, because at one point, most of those full-timers were adjuncts themselves. It's sort of just the nature of the industry. So I would just say eloquently state that you are a current graduate student or soon to be graduated looking for employment at the community college level, whether adjunct or full-time. So just give the availability, right? And of course, most of the time they'll probably say, because you're new and you're starting out, so they'll probably offer you adjunct work first. Just like Hazel said earlier, it's very rare that someone straight out of a grad program will just going to snatch a coveted full-time position because they have like a whole pool of adjuncts in the stack, not to mention the adjuncts that they already work with, right, in the department. So yeah, just leave it kind of open-ended for adjunct work, full-time, etc., and you should be fine.
I would also add to that 100% agree. But we're also, I'm in my noticing of different hiring committees that I've been in, is that there's a concern that our applicants might be using or thinking that big community college teaching position is going to be a stepping stone, kind of as a way to university teaching. So I would really emphasize, right, like, why is it that you particularly want to come into community college, and why is your focus mainly on teaching and not, research? And of course that's important as well, but in my experience, it seems like they're really focused on, they want to find really good teachers, right? You're required to teach a minimum of 5 courses a full-time instructor. They don't give you any time or compensation for research or writing or anything like that. So I would really focus and highlight that in your application materials.
And if I can just thank you, if I can just share the national statistic with you, that 58% of community college courses in all disciplines are taught by contingent or part-time faculty. So I think that that's an interesting statistic. And then what percentage of community college faculty have doctorates? And the number is at around 20%. so this is not a huge contingent, and it probably also depends on which discipline you're talking about. And many of you are interested in a career in community college teaching, and many of you, 2/3 of you, also went to a community college. So I'm just going to share that. And I know I don't want to keep everyone for too long. I just wanted to see if we have any more questions. Thank you also very much for sharing your contact information. Do we have other questions right now that we want to ask right now? I'm sorry, Hazel, yes.
One last thing, I forgot to mention this earlier in my talk. Sort of the realities of the job market in teaching at a community college, like you already said, right, with the numbers that the great majority of our faculty are the part-timers, adjunct pool. And so with that, it's very difficult to get that full-time job. You already know that. When I went into, teaching community college, I gave myself 5 years to be a freeway flyer. That was, and then my plan B was to go back and get my, I was already lining up a CHOA, right? He already had UCI in his mind for me to pursue a PhD if it wasn't going to work out for me. But I was very aware of the job market, that there was a huge possibility that I was not going to get that full-time job. And I think you need to, and when George approached me several years ago, that was the very first thing that I said to him: you need to understand the realities of the job market, that it is very difficult to get a full-time job, and you could be teaching at a college for dozens of years and still not get that full-time job. And just because you've been there for 20 years doesn't mean, there's no automatic, it's not like a stepping stone, right? You don't get to teach for 20 years and then, okay, you've been there long enough, you get that full-time job. It doesn't work that way. And so that's the reality. So you got to have a plan B. And so it kind of, I think a few years ago, I want to say 10 years ago, one of our colleagues went to an AHA conference, American History Association conference, and they talked about the job prospects in the next 20 years in the history field. And it was very, very good, it was like, oh, not much work in the next 20 years. So we got another 10 years to go. But, there's always, I don't want to give you like my gosh, it's impossible. But I do want you to be aware of the realities that it is very difficult. Just like it's very, academic careers, at the UC, at Cal State level, it's very, very difficult. It's like the coveted job, right? It's also as difficult at the community college level. But I think it's, if getting into this field, that's the reality, and just have a realistic time frame, and then and be strategic about how you go about applying. And networking, I think you have a better chance of getting, that job. And the job market back in 2004 was very, very different than it is now, and that it has been in the last 17 years. So, but, like I said, there's always that retirement, especially with COVID. We had quite a few retirees, in our division. And so there may be many more in the next couple of years, and you can hope for that it'll open up some doors for you. So that's all I'll have to say. Thank you.
Let me just, if I can add one more thing, Berta, just to kind of go off of what Hazel said, even at Santa Monica, because of that $13 million budget cut due to COVID, so many golden parachutes were offered to the sort of senior level folks to maintain that budget cut. I can't quantify how many, but it was considerable. So definitely in the next like 2-3 years, once the funding numbers start opening back up from the state of California, et cetera, you might start seeing a lot more job offers. So definitely kind of, keep applying, best foot forward, but obviously understand you might get one class, you might get 5 a semester, you have no idea. So definitely have plan Bs and just keep working forward as best you can. Because some people, like Hazel said, you can work 20-30 years as adjunct and be perfect as a part-timer, but let's say they might not want you as a full-timer because you're not putting in the extra efforts to be part of the campus or the college or the Senate or a whole host of other things, right? That just the reality of it. Be smart about it, and yeah, hopefully, let the odds be ever in your favor, to quote Hunger Games, as far as job market goes.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And Michaela, thank you for reminding everyone here that we had this this raffle that Michaela ran through everyone's name through a randomizer, and Cole and Savannah won the $25 Amazon gift cards and sent the information to Michaela. She'll send it to me, and I'll send you the the Amazon gift cards via email, probably tomorrow, maybe not tonight anymore. Let's see. Chris, do you have any final thoughts and instructions?
Well, no, well, first off, just thank you so much for our 4 guest speakers. It's wonderful to see students come back as teachers, and teachers who can teach me about higher education careers. So thank you, George, Ben, Abby, and Hazel. I'm happy. I'm going to stick around afterwards. History 5800 students, if you want to take a break, we can start our 15-minute break now, and we'll come back in our regular Zoom link at 8:05. If you want to talk more with our guest speakers, I'm going to stick around. But if you are kind of let's officially end the 5800 section of the class. So we can start our break now. We'll resume at 8:05 on regular Zoom. But again, we might have a chance to stick around and chat further if you want to.
And history 5,000 students, we won't take a break. We're going to stretch for a minute here. If you want to stick around for a couple minutes and then rejoin on, let's just stay on this Zoom link. I think that'll work as well. So if you have more questions, and then we can talk about, well, what happens after spring break in a little while. So any
Thank you so much. I wish I could stay. I wish I was a student again.
I actually have one question for, I guess, for all of you who are teaching online courses. In our department, we've been talking a lot about pass and fail rates. And we've been trying to reduce the fail rates for especially for the introductory history courses. And I'm wondering what the pass or fail rate is for those online courses that you're teaching. Not COVID, but your organized purposely online courses. Mm-hmm.
Right. I have to say, retention rate is horrible. Right. It's always been that way for the fully online class. But for the ones who stay, we do a lot of hand holding, with the whole equity thing, and especially with COVID. And I think there's a higher percentage of passage these days because of that. When a student misses an assignment, they will receive a communication from me the next day. I do these nudges, and those things help for the ones who persist and they stay. So for the ones who really stay, I teach 8-week courses. They do very, very well. But for a class of 32, typically I'll end up with 20, 22. That's high, right? And most of them, I would say, most of them will pass, and with very high grades, A's and B's.
Thank you.
It's a really great question. I noticed at Rio Hondo, when we're comparing our online courses rates pre-COVID, that same thing as Hazel, like our retention rates, particularly for the semester-long courses, were just horrible. We do a little bit better with the fast track courses, and then we're kind of coming to that conclusion, like, well, maybe that 16 weeks to just maintain this, to keep going, is a little bit too hard for students. There's so much that can come up in their lives, right, during that 16 weeks. So yeah, we do have much better success and retention rates in those 8 weeks and 10-week online courses. But I can't remember if Cal State LA is on semesters or a quarter system.
We're in semesters now.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So
that's tragic. Sorry.
It's a long time to teach a course, right? And to be a
student.
It
is. Yeah. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and when we kind of inflated success rates from like last spring, because we're not giving any student an F no matter what. If they're failing the course, they get an automatic EW. And my colleagues and friends that I talk to, fellow instructors, we would talk about, like, how are you handling this? We're hearing from students that they're panicking. Their parents have been diagnosed with COVID, or they've lost their job and that sort of thing. And so we were being very generous with due dates and extensions and all of that. So when you look at our success rates for the spring of 2020, they go like this. And then everything was kind of back to normal in the fall. And so they're going like this again. So yeah, that was one of the changes I've noticed from that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really interesting that, maybe you can cut instead of teaching it a semester length course, you teach it for 8 weeks rather than 16 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, the 16 weeks, there's just so much that can happen during that time period. And it's hard for, especially our students, we have a large like working class population. And these students, in addition to going to school full time, they're working full time, they have families, they have kids, all of those sort of factors in place. So it's easy to get off track and hard to, sometimes pick back up once you get off that track there. So, and it's usually the students who are more interested in online courses are those working students that have those other, life obligations. And then, we do see that with the 16 weeks. So yeah, the fast track generally is so much better. You have to also, because it's like you're condensing a whole semester of, instruction in 8 weeks, it's a lot of sending out reminders and a lot of communication. So I feel like it's, very labor intensive for that part, but they do better.
I want to add with the 8-week intensive course, the students really, the ones who take it and stay, they really like it. They like the fact that it's stressful for them. Obviously, they admit that, but they like the fact that it's quick. It's like the pain is quick, and they're done with it, and they're done with a 3-unit class. Right. I actually prefer. I've always loved the quarter system. I was fortunate that I was at Cal State LA when it was a quarter system, and teaching it is. I prefer, I find the 16-week semester so long, it's painful. And if I feel that way, I could only imagine what my students must feel. And then the other thing too, is that with the 8-week condensed sessions, they don't have time to slack off. And I train them that, I emphasize that in the very beginning, like you cannot even get behind, because once you do, it's nearly impossible to catch up. So I think because of the intensity of it, those that are able to and are willing to do it, they do very, very well, because it's like, in and itself, they're motivated to do it because it's so fast.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you raise a good point that if faculty are getting tired, then students are going to be even more tired. I've noticed that also, because we used to have classes that would go until 9:45 at night also. So those were the days. Right, but so I had a question about ethnic studies, and there's a new state requirement for Cal State ethnic studies courses for undergraduates, and I'm curious, how is that? How are the community colleges preparing for that, and are there opportunities for people who have a history master's degree to teach ethnic studies courses? What has there been any conversations that you've been part of on kind of how the landscape of GE, general education classes will change with the new state education or ethnic studies requirement?
Well, at Glendale, we have an ethnic studies department with one full-timer and several part-timers. So we've already had that, and they're looking. I know that the chair of the department wants to the college to hire another full-timer. Whether or not that's possible, it's a budget situation. That's another story. But I think it just reaffirmed for us, right, the existing program that we've already had, how important it is, and so it's allowed us to, I think, expand our offerings even more in ethnic studies. If you have a straight history degree, that's more of an HR issue. Like, I don't know if you can get a faculty service agreement at FSA to be able to teach ethnic studies. They changed things at Glendale College a few years ago. Because of all the different classes that I've taught, I was able to teach an ethnic studies class in Asian American studies. And then one day our HR department decided to change, how they were going to accept folks' degrees and FSAs, and so they just did a hard rule. And now I am only allowed to teach, history, and so it was disappointing, right, for those of us who before we were able to do that. But I think if you had something like American Studies, Gender Studies, some of those units might count in conjunction with your history degree. But that's something that, you know, if somebody has that kind of background, they'd really need to check with the HR for that particular school to make sure that they can teach multidiscipline.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting to hear, because I don't know if we have that same dynamic at our university, because there's a lot of hiring. You know, we might hire somebody who has an ethnic studies background. Ethnic studies might hire somebody with a PhD in history. So we have this overlap. But it's interesting to know that HR has that kind of power.
Yeah, I don't really know the details and how they did that. You know, there's some grumbling, obviously, from faculty in how they did that. Whether, I mean, it's been so long now that I think to go back and reverse the policy is now not possible. But I know that there's some things that they can do, you know, depending on your bachelor's. You know, like I have a bachelor's in philosophy. If I took a few more classes, I think at the graduate level, because of that background, and then having a graduate degree in history, I may be able to teach, you know, a class in philosophy if that was something that I wanted to do. So there's something that you can kind of combine, but again, that's sort of unique to each school, and you know, the faculty member would have to check with the HR to see how that's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, at Rio Hondo, we were just, you know, we don't have ethnic studies department, but we do have a Chicanic study. And our one full-time faculty member in that, she actually has her PhD in ethnic studies. But we were taking guidance from, you know, Academic Senate, the State Academic Senate for Community College Systems. And initially they were saying that you had to have, like, as Hazel mentioned, like either a master's degree in ethnic studies, or there's interdisciplinary studies and things like that, or you could have any sort of related, you know, master's degree, and then your bachelor's degree could be in like ethnic studies, like African American studies, Chicano studies, that sort of thing. But now, since that the CSU system has made the requirement, right, for you would need the ethnic studies graduation requirement, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of trying to figure out, you know, well, what would be the minimum quals now? Because once the Cal State said that would be a graduation requirement, that students would need to have that, you know, ethnic studies, then a number of different social sciences started to cross-list their courses, right? They wanted to say, for instance, you could do Black history with ethnic studies cross-listed, but then the question came up of, okay, if I'm qualified to teach African American history, what makes me qualified to teach African American studies? These are two, you know, different things, and of course, history is a major part of the studies, but there's additional things you have to, you know, be knowledgeable in. So what we're getting now is that, as Hazel mentioned, it's really coming down to the local level, but the Cal States, they're being a little bit more picky about what they accept in terms of that ethnic studies requirement of what they'll accept for transfer. So I've heard that cross-listing is something they're kind of frowning upon at the moment because of that, of who do you have those minimum qualifications in ethnic studies, not that your college decided you can cross-list it and you have a history degree. So that's where it's still kind of being worked out right now. And I think the community colleges are actually discussing whether that ethnic studies would be a requirement as well for graduation. So it's kind of still up in the air. We're still figuring it out. But for right now, we're saying, you know, if you have a master's degree in history, you have to have like a bachelor's degree in ethnic studies or so forth, or you have to have at least, you know, 16 graduation units, you know, or graduate units in ethnic studies in order to qualify. So it's still fluid at this point. We're figuring it out.
Right. Okay. But in some ways, that's an argument for us to have more cross-listed classes with ethnic studies, you know, where we have some. That's something just kind of throwing out ideas here. Well, I've got my own class I've got to get to in 2 minutes to pick up. But it was so great to see. So great to see you, and thank you for sharing your time and your expertise.
Thank you again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doug.
Great
Great to see you.
Yeah.
All right.
Night.
Hi, Chris.
Okay. Goodbye.
All right, I'm going to